which is what the first academy was, as an institution, fails to even ask, in blunt, public, and unambiguous terms, why we, who in the words of Lord Young, have never had it so good. He was right, of course, which is why he was forced to resign. Why we privilege, at a time of plenty, privatized asset growth and militarism over questions of curiosity, beauty, justice, love, and truth, the university fails itself. One of the reasons we fail to adequately answer these questions and so fail to defend non-monetizable values is because our material background, the great booming, buzzing confusion that makes us and shapes what it is possible to think, is easily taken for granted, and we all do this. We're creatures of habit, and as such, our everyday habitats escape us. We become them. Comfortable, safe, well-fed, and privileged compared to most of the world, we have come to expect that what is here now, and by this I mean the values which inhere through these walls, curiosity, debate, etc., are somehow natural and inevitable. And that's why I would say, with due respect to the Chancellor, when he held up his values book, that actually they will change. He's wrong to assume that they won't change. They will change. And they will change because our habitats are us. And you change the habitat and you change the fish that's in it. These things are not natural and inevitable. They're emergent properties of matter, history, debate, boredom, excitement, and struggle, and need, as indeterminate products, to be continually defended. The trouble is the material conditions for their defense saturate our everyday. They are the fish to our water. When people say that universities are good for nothing and need to justify themselves with real work and practical value, and there are lots and lots and lots of people who say that, and you need to only to look at the online comments underneath the daily newspapers, all not just the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph, but the Observer and the Guardian, all of them. I feel like asking in purely instrumental terms, so you don't go to the doctor, you don't send your children to school, where accredited teachers are themselves products of learning and values. You don't eat food or drink water, which were grown and provisioned and regulated by people who went to universities. You don't drive, travel on trains, or fly in wondrous machines that were designed by the creative intellects of people over many decades. You don't read newspapers, books, magazines, the internet, or watch TV or movies, which were touched by universities in some respect. You don't enjoy the privilege of being able to read and watch whatever you like, which is protected by the words and the activities and the people at universities and lawyers and who fight for those rights and responsibilities. And you don't enjoy the mobile phone, whose means were made possible by decades of difficult mathematics and physics, whose immediately non-instrumental outcomes were protected by the space of the sacred grove. You do none of those things. And of course, the list can go on. And there's some who say, no, I don't do many of those things, and they fall into two camps. The first one might be Amish. Right? But they have chosen to remove themselves from those choices, from that material background which produces them in a particular way. The second might be somebody from northern Afghanistan. She might live in Afghanistan, where she might have heard, although probably not, that our bombs which fell through her house were to defend her right to go to school. But neither of those camps is us. The point is that we're fighting a war ostensibly not for instrumental means, although that's debatable, but for what these instruments perform and enact. The instruments of doctor, road, clean running water, teacher, newspaper, lawyer, etc. don't represent value. They are value, but as such their value constituted and made possible by a wider whole. University comes from the Latin universitas, which means whole, the whole, which itself is justified and sustained by the sacred grove whose space protects the question as question. This grove beats to a rhythm different than the sum of its constituent parts. This rhythm, dissonant, difficult, often contradictory, and always fragile, can be heard and felt in the university, and ever faintly, in its extended bodily instruments. and that we live our everyday lives increasingly through the lenses of instruments inures us to the long history, I'm almost done, of enabling material and social conditions which allows us to take these emergent products and their presence for granted and assume that as the condition of things they will continue into the future. Their saturating presence is both their strength and their fragility. Oceans, as acidification levels are now telling us, are sensitive things. So then to conclude, if we think that the privileges and responsibilities we have today and which we're fighting over will not change as a result of the current redrawing of higher education boundaries, we are wrong. If we think that the university will continue as before and more justly and in a more distributive manner, which is what Nick Clegg and David Clark and David Cameron and our masters seem to be wanting to tell us, we are wrong. Simply follow the interest trail on millions of pounds of student debt in the years to come. I can tell you about my experience with interest debt coming from the Canadian system. I refuse to believe that there is no alternative to the ongoing changes to higher education, especially when billions are funneled through public debt into private hands. There are lots of people at the university whose life's work it is to suggest ways of thinking differently. We need to listen to them, but most of all defend them. Maybe higher education is not good for anything. Maybe it is, like the life and the arts and the sciences it celebrates, a good in itself.